Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out today. My name's Andrew Hughes, as you can see on the slide, and today we're going to talk about a few things. First thing is this idea of a personal data receipt. We'll do the infamous, not to you, but infamous to me, Cantera Initiative Privacy Control Panel demo. We'll show some real products that are in our work group at Cantera. The members actually have started creating products that do real things, and oh, by the way, also do consent receipts and personal data receipts. So we'll see how they're using them today. And then we'll talk a little bit about the work group and how you can sign up and join us to move it forward. So what is this consent receipt, personal data receipt specification? It's a data model, a data spec, a data format, and it does these three things, as every other interoperable data format does. Simple, standardized, and you guys do whatever it is you need to do with it, because we're not going to tell you how to implement anything. We give you the data format, you can exchange it, the receipts, but you have to invent. So, does anyone know what a personal data receipt is already, besides the people that I know that are in the room? No? Okay, so when talking about personal data receipts and consent receipts, it's challenging, because if you start off with consent, you get bogged down, because consent means many different things. In privacy law, it means one thing. In general English discussion, it means a different thing, and you get tied up in the weeds. So we decided that we'd focus on the word receipt. So, what is a receipt? Get personal data out of your head. Don't think about it. This has nothing to do with data. A sales receipt. Everyone knows what a sales receipt is, okay? You buy something, you pay the money, you get a receipt. But what's the data on a sales receipt? Well, what is a sales receipt? It's a personal record. So it's your record of the transaction. It has an independent existence from the receipt issuer. It's stored in your wallet, either paper, electronic, whatever. It has some form of evidence of the event, right? Something happened, I got the receipt. Metadata, everyone knows about metadata here, timestamps, electronic signatures, keys, that sort of thing. And most importantly, and we'll see this later on, it points or contains the issuer's policy statements. What's the warranty policy? What if something goes wrong? If there's a dispute, what do we do? Jointly with the vendor. Okay, so that's a sales receipt. Receipts by themselves are completely useless. They're little pieces of paper, little bits of data. So we're going to talk a little bit about the agreement flow and see where receipts, sales receipts, fit in the bigger picture. So what is the agreement flow? This is a very simple sequence flowish diagram, right? Don't build software based on this because it won't work. So a vendor, this is selling stuff, okay? A vendor has a service, they make it available, they advertise it. The person says, oh, hey, look at this. I can get a widget. Let's go and see what it's about. So the vendor provides some notices and offers terms. The widget is $5. The notices are, here's the warranty policy, and so on. This is not about data, this is just stuff, okay? The person says, $5 is too much. Cancel. I don't want it. Well, that's not interesting, so let's do the interesting case. The person says, okay, $5 for the thing? Sure. I agree to your terms. Let's go. The two parties, the vendor and the individual, commit and intend to form an agreement. They establish agreement. The vendor always keeps records because they have to pay taxes. And oh, they have bookkeepers. And oh, they're probably regulated in some way, so they're required to keep records. There's an exchange of valuable consideration. So I get the widget, vendor gets the $5, and then at some point the agreement ends. That's the agreement flow. Simple. Does everyone recognize the agreement flow, right? It's based on the concepts of contract law. It isn't contract law, but it's based on the concepts of it. It's simple. And it highlights the interactions that I just described, right? Offer and accept, a meeting of the minds, the intent to enter into agreement, record keeping, and exchange of this thing called valuable consideration, the stuff. Okay. If you go into a store and buy something, do you expect a receipt if you ask for a receipt? In some countries, are you allowed to leave the store unless you take the receipt? Yes, there are some countries where you're required to take the receipt. But if it's your personal data, where's my receipt? Like, I think it has value. In the hotel concierge gives me a receipt if I give them my luggage. Is my personal data less valuable than my luggage? Don't answer that. Is your personal data less valuable than my luggage? Don't answer that. You get the point. So, think of all those previous slides, but now personal data is involved. You buy the widget, give me your email address so we can send you the newsletter, personal data, right? Let's not deal with sensitive stuff. Just give me your email address and I'll send you the newsletter. What's involved? Well, there's a privacy notice, a privacy statement. You have to be told, under privacy laws, the purpose of the processing, the purpose that they're taking the data and doing something with it, contact information, and then privacy officer stuff. Okay? If you don't read the privacy policies, you'll have no idea what that privacy officer stuff is. Trust me, it's there. How many of you noticed that I didn't actually talk about the record keeping on the person's side? That points at the record on the vendor's side, the data controller's side. That is the consent receipt. That's the personal data receipt. It does not exist today. Well, actually, it does exist today, and you will all implement it in the next year, right? So imagine the power of this, right? There is no independently kept personal record of the event because of this. The user experience of having the person fill out their email address is bad enough. Imagine if you had to ask them where to store their receipt and would you like a printout, and no. User experience says there should be no extra steps to get a receipt. We'll show you how that the extra steps part doesn't have to happen. Instead of a sales receipt, a personal data receipt is all of the same things. There's valuable consideration, there's value, there's data required for the service. Data's not for sale in this, so you're not selling your data for the stuff. The vendor is asking for data in order to deliver the service to you. So it's a personal record, it's held independently of the receipt issuer. Some evidence of the event, it has the metadata, and most importantly, it points at the policy statements. In GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation law, these are required, but they don't require that the person gets a copy. The data controller has to provide this information to you. We'll see examples of live interactive open notices. This is notice stuff, and how that transforms into receipts. They're the same plus timestamps, if you see what I mean. So, standardized personal data receipt lets you exercise your data rights. Okay, so let's talk specifications very briefly. Published in February 2018, version 1.1, consent receipt specification. I've got a page full of links at the back, and the slides will be online soon. Hey, here's a consent receipt. Awesome, eh? Let's go. This is awesome. There was some dispute about new line and return, so I didn't break the line. Yeah. This is a consent receipt. So obviously, the JSON file can be rendered in any way you want. Make it look like a form if you want, right? Put it on the UI of your mobile. Put it, whatever, doesn't matter. These are the real receipts from the real products. Okay? So you can see different form factors, different layouts. The experience is yours as the app developer to make. The data is in the format of the receipt. Okay, there you go. You guys should just keep your cameras out. Sorry, your phones out. Okay, so that's the super exciting, boring part. The next few minutes, we're just going to show what this actually looks like in real and imagined products. Okay? These are the Cantera Initiative members that helped write the specification and also have products that we'll see today. Okay, okay, so the first one. So whenever you're doing a demo, just a tip, have a story in your head about what's the context of the demo, what's the story. Okay, so imagine in a few minutes you've agreed to 500 services because you're automatically sending data from these. No, imagine in a few weeks, a few months, a few years, you're an internet user. You click OK, you click agree, you fill out forms, whatever. 500 services. Now what? Are you one of the 1.5 billion accounts that was just stolen yesterday? I haven't looked at the news yet, so I don't know which company it is yet, but when we're done, I'll find out. Well, clearly, you're going to use your control panel, which kind of looks like a dashboard in one imagining of it. We don't specify the dashboard part. We specify the receipts in the shoebox. Okay? So what's the demo about? Well, you get a receipt, you store a receipt, and you look at the receipt. So the first thing we're going to show is a video, because not all the companies were able to make it to Identiverse, so I asked them to do 2-minute video clips highlighting what their products do. So Transmute Industries. This one, the app that they have, allows cargo drivers to prove that they're authorized to drive the truck they're sitting in. This is interesting. Okay.
Transmute is an identity security company based in Austin, Texas. We built Transmute ID, which is an identity security platform that improves efficiency, traceability, and privacy for companies working with distributed networks of vendors and partners. What we do is we create unique identifiers for people and things, and we tie those identifiers to verifiable credentials. Actors in the system can now take actions in an auditable way with the opportunity to anchor events to a distributed ledger. We're proud to work with our partners at Cantera to incorporate consent receipts into the data sharing functionality of Transmute ID. Let's look at an example of how this works. In the ground freight logistics context, drivers often need to share sensitive personal data or credentials with larger carriers that they work with, as well as other members of the supply chain ecosystem. A driver is able to use Transmute ID to upload and securely share a file. For example, here Paul is sharing his TWIC card, which helps him get into ports of entry. He's going to share this with a carrier that he's just started working with and have that carrier sign to verify that its credential is valid. Paul will then have a signed or verifiable credential that he can share with other actors in the system when he needs to, for example, enter a port or confirm with a manufacturer that he does in fact have the correct credentials. Paul shares his credential with the carrier and requests that they sign to verify. That carrier then reviews and signs that personal data and verifies the credential. all of this evidence of data sharing is captured with attestations tied to a distributed ledger. At the end of this very simple request flow, both parties receive a mutual record or receipt, which indicates exactly what data was shared, what validation took place, and associated metadata. The driver can now go share this verifiable credential with other parties and revoke access to that data as required. The driver also can share evidence of this attestation without actually sharing the original personal data. And this selective disclosure means that they put other parties in the system at less risk of holding their personal data. This is exciting both for drivers and for the companies that they work with. If you have any questions, contact us at support@transmute.industries. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'll show you the slides that I was supposed to show you. No, the transmute is a very interesting. Not sure if any of you saw the keynote, but one of the Microsoft folks mentioned the sidechain specs. Transmute helped write and invent the sidechain specifications from the Decentralized Identity Foundation, if you're interested. So what I'm actually going to show you is the demo setup that I actually set up, not transmute. Okay, so if you remember back a few minutes, we're doing a demo of the Cantera Privacy Control Panel, where a person gets a receipt, stores a receipt, views a receipt. Consentua is one of the product vendors in our work group, and they provide APIs for you to implement consent management tools in your software. The demo that Consentua has here is the regular product demo. They didn't change it because of the show that we're doing today. And what they have is a paper cup shop. And the sidebar shows indicators about their API. Oh, look at this. What I'm going to show you, though, first is just keep an eye on this right here, the C1. So there's a receipt collector. It's the shoebox, right? And this number will change as receipts get stuffed into the shoebox. Would you like a cookie? Yes, I like cookies. And you can see that in their demo panel that we accept a cookie. So we'll click next. Yes. Okay, let's buy some paper cups. Okay, done with that part. Okay, we're in the checkout function. They want detailed location information for very good reasons, right? Shipping the cups. Okay, let's say okay. And, ooh, there's 3 receipts in this session. That's okay. Apparently the internet is working. None of this is local, obviously, otherwise. Okay, it's just like a logging in single sign-on demo. You can't see anything. Right. Trust me, this is on the internet. Join the newsletter. Okay, sure. Join the newsletter for all the obvious things. Okay, and just show you this. There's 4.
Have you thought about an actual shoebox icon? This could be a whole new visual language instead of the folder.
An anonymous interested audience participant, who I don't know, yeah, probably it's going to show up as a shoebox icon. For those of you that don't understand the shoebox analogy, if you're a small business, if you get a receipt for expenses, you stuff it in the shoebox, and then at tax time, you give the shoebox to your accountant to deal with. And it's stuffed full of receipts, and they're the dashboard to the IRS, right? That's why it's a shoebox. Okay, so fine. Let's take a look at the control panel. You can see we've been using this for a little while. So let me go down to the bottom. This is really just hacked together just to prove the point. This is not real software, right? It's, okay, let's get rid of that. But it is really storing receipts, right? This is GMT, so it's now, right? The buttons don't work, but imagine in the receipt, there are URLs and URIs that point at the policies that you agreed to when you clicked OK. You can pause sharing of data. You can erase the data. And imagine in a real implementation that revoke, what if it pre-writes an email to the data controller email address that's in the receipt? Because no data controller is ready to receive an API call to do the erasure, right? But pre-fill the email, it's got all the receipt details, so they don't have to guess who you are. It helps with the authentication, right? Because they know where to look for you in the records. It helps them find the records. And if for some reason they've lost their record of you and your data, not your data, but the record that you agreed to it, you have all the pointers you need for them to look you up and find the data, or at least have a chance of finding the data, okay? Microphone there?
I can talk loud.
It's for the recording.
Oh, sure. So what about the...
Turn it on. Just push up. Yeah.
There we go. What about when the provider has a change in their terms and conditions? Are there mechanisms in the spec to update or at least notify you within that there's been a change on the other end?
Absolutely not. The receipt is a data format. What you invent with it is up to you. And what we're going to see is one instance of a live network where you register your terms and conditions and policies, and the icon on your website changes color when there's been, so I go to a website, it's green, no change in the policies. I go back, there's been a change. I know there's been, so yes, implementers, absolutely. Okay. Maybe I should have gotten more sleep. Okay, let's get the slide deck going again. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Alec Laws. He'll do the more introduction of himself, and you're going to show us a live pilot product.
Yeah, our product,
Okay.
where consent receipts will fit in. Yeah.
Yep.
So just quickly, who we are. We're started as a mobile security company, and we're getting more into compliance management and ecosystems of sharing. So we're really about enabling marketplaces and communities of practice, or just communities in general. And to that end, we use user-managed access. So another Kantara working group product. And we're profiling and extending it to ensure there's appropriate privacy in, for example, healthcare and government to consumer verticals. And we're trying to bring in mobile to improve the security of the situation. So architecture, not really, but high-level sort of overview. There's pools of service providers that want your data, and there's pools of resource servers that have your data. And using user-managed access, you should be able to consent to share your data with those service providers, following some terms, some previously agreed upon legal agreements made with the operator of our product. So why am I here? Why do we talk about consent receipts at all? We didn't start with consent receipts. We've only recently, maybe past 6 months, have become involved with this. But our platform, at the end of the day, it's about notice, consent, policy management, seeing the history of what you've shared, and giving users choices about how they want to share their data. So what consent receipts give to us is sort of a standard language to ensure that notices and consent meet those compliance and regulatory requirements. So, for example, have all the fields that you need to meet notice requirements. Make the history actionable, so actually knowing where to go to exercise your rights once you've made a data sharing agreement. And user choice, so one of those resource servers could be your Shoebox API, and you should be able to choose where you want your receipts directed, right? So I'm going to show two parts to this demo today. The first part is sort of that notice and consent flow, where diabetes management app, we call it Banting, it's a demo app. So we're going to request a very granular piece of your electronic health record, just your A1C history, which is an indicator about your blood glucose over the past 3 months. You're going to see the notice and consent. They're going to pull that authorized data directly from the electronic health record, and then they push a receipt back to sort of that consent receipt shoebox. And the important piece here is that the terms that you agree to match the receipt that was provided to you, right? And then the second part I'm going to show is a year later, after you've maybe dealt with your diabetes problem or found other apps and solutions, going back and seeing, oh, I've shared my A1C history with all these apps and I don't use them anymore. So how can I action that? How can I take that back and make that service provider either forget my data or exercise my rights to revocation, right? Okay, so.
Take this one out of the way. Actually, I'll set your. Yeah.
So this is our real product. Hasn't been changed at all to support this demo. Oh, 2 hands. Oh no, I double tap.
Oh, right, sorry.
It's okay.
I messed you up.
So this is our application where sort of Niagara Health in this case is managing a community of service providers for their constituents. So different applications that they've approved. Jeez, I turned that off. Okay.
You're getting a notice for all those, don't worry.
Look, do not disturb, it's on. No. So I start on the service provider website, and they're offering me service. If I import my A1C history, and I try.
We'll edit that out, don't worry.
That's how you know it's real, because it's connected to the internet, right? Import your A1C history. They're going to help you manage your diabetes, maybe give you meal plans. So you want to connect your data using your navigator. There's the ability to have multiple wallets here. So you've seen flows like this before, where I open my wallet, I see that I've connected to my Ontario and New Brunswick electronic health records. Maybe I moved recently. I'm able to scan that to transition to the phone, review the terms. This is where we see consent receipts coming in for the first time, where they could capture the terms, almost a template for what the terms would be. And I share a consent, right? So Banting, the app, is now able to reach out to my A1C history, get my records, right? So then 1 year later, I've used all these services in that past year. You can see this is from one night of just making sure this works, and tons of receipts already, right? So I'm going to say Banting, I shared my A1C history from my New Brunswick health record, but I don't want to do that anymore because I haven't used this app for a long time. And I can revoke it, and the service provider's access is cut off in our platform, and they should also, I want to get back to this. Just
Yep. One more. There you go.
should also be pushing back a confirmation. So that's the third place the receipt will come in, where I've revoked and they say, here's a receipt for the revocation. It actually happened. So this app is our proof of concept app. We're currently working through the sort of the user testing to make this more accessible to regular people, doing our hallway testing and pulling people off the street. And this is our functionality on web, where you can see a more sort of complete history, a more complete view of the terms that you've agreed to. Yeah.
Okay. Get your cameras out if you want to contact Alec about this. So, Alec, where did the app come from? Is it actually being used today?
I'll turn this back. So we're starting a pilot with Niagara Health Services in Ontario, which is a sort of a 6-hospital system, and they're hooking up their hospital information system to allow people to credential themselves and get better service, and also working with the provincial government to get access to the provincial health assets in Ontario. All the provinces have provincial registries, but nobody can access them because there's no concept of digital identity to bind me to my data. So we're trying to bring that so that new innovative service provider applications, public, private sector, can start accessing that data and providing new innovative services to the people in Niagara Health.
Cool.
Right.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a point again, which is, of course, the Identiverse product has nothing to do with consent receipts at all. But as soon as they discovered this concept of consent receipts, personal data receipts, it didn't take a lot of work to integrate them in because you're keeping the records already.
Exactly.
Right? So this is nothing new. This is just give the person a copy. That's it. So next up, Sphere Identity from New Zealand. Let's see how they're using consent receipts.
Sphere Identity is a digital identity platform that simplifies customer sign-ups and hands the control back to individuals. Privacy and security are built into a seamless customer experience. Our consent receipts are a perfect example of the privacy practices we've integrated into this customer-focused solution. In this demonstration, we'd like to showcase our implementation of a third-party consent receipt, which is based on the Kantara Initiative specification. On the left side of the screen, we see our customer Benjamin using the mobile app to sign up for services. Benjamin maintains his profile on the Sphere Identity app, which contains personal information such as email and date of birth, as well as his personal identity documents. Sphere Identity issues a consent receipt when users upload their documents to the app and every time they share their data with a business. Now, let's see how it works. Take a look at the e-commerce website on the right side of the screen. Following his usual shopping flow, Benjamin adds an item to the cart, navigates to the checkout, and chooses Sphere Identity to complete his transaction. In this interaction, he must scan the QR code and consent to share the required data. Our consent receipts also provide detailed information on the purpose of data collection. Users can select the exact attributes they'd like to use for each business when applicable. Benjamin is then presented with a consent receipt outlining all transactional data and identifiers, such as time, date, and number. He can also withdraw his consent and revoke access to his data at any time. This was an example of how consent receipts are used in the Sphere Identity app. Thanks for your attention.
Okay. And for more information, please take a picture. They'd be happy. Their market tends to be Asia Pacific, just because of their geographic location. So they're working hard at getting more clients in the Belt and Road initiatives that are going on. Okay. One thing I'd like to point out before we go on, notice that the narrator was saying consent receipt, and I'm saying both consent receipt and personal data receipt. Personal data receipt is a generalized personal data receipt. The consent receipt specification is a profile or specialization of that general receipt. So if you're not using consent as a legal basis, or if you're not even talking about strictly personal data, you can take the general specification, which we're revamping this summer, and write a profile to your specific use case. I was talking with Thomas Harjono from MIT about the Open Algorithms project that he's on, that he's spearheading through the group. It's where you select from a library of algorithms and attach them to your data. You don't give your data to the algorithm, that idea. Well, what about an open algorithm receipt, right? Wouldn't that be cool? So you know what algorithm you downloaded and ran on your data sometime in the future. Anyways. Next up, Sal D'Agostino with Open Notice Network. Okay. Let me get you.
All right, so little prayer to the demo gods, and God knows what Deb did to me last night. So this is the Open Notice Network. My name's Sal D'Agostino. I'm a co-founder of Open Consent. I'm also the secretary of the Cantara Leadership Council, and my partner in Open Consent, Mark Lazar, is the co-editor of the consent receipt specification. And so what I'm going to show you today is basically this Open Notice Network. So for us, and then as Andrew pointed out, like the consent receipt is a notice receipt for consent, right? So, but the fact that you can use notice throughout the workflow, it really became obvious to us. And so for the last several years, we've been building something which we call the Open Notice Network. And I'm just going to go, I'm not going to take you through this whole process. I'll go through a bunch of tabs to sort of show you what it does. So basically, we start with a controller registration, right? So as a, and again, me and Mac here. So you go through the process of registering your company, and there's a few things that are important, right? So one would be the legal basis of the entity. So we've actually interfaced to something called the Open Corporates Network. So besides whether, because it's really important, right? So you get a receipt, and then you got a receipt and the company was acquired. So, what's the story there? So besides tracking things like the status of a privacy policy, which is something I'll show you, we actually start with the status of the legal entity, because in many of these cases, you want that receipt to have a basis in existing law. And if it isn't backed by a legal entity, then it gets a little tricky. So you would go through this registration process, register first at a company level, and then at a service level. So I'm just going to go take you through the company level flow and show you what that looks like. So as a company, my other company besides Open Consent, something called ID Machines. So if you go to idmachines.com, you'll see all this fun cybersecurity automation stuff that we do, and automate privacy and all these fun things. But then if you were to click on our privacy policy, it's a little different than your normal privacy policy, right? So how useful are privacy policies today in general? Not too, right? But in this case, basically, as Andrew was referring to before, there's this signal on our privacy policy. And what that privacy policy basically says, sorry, let me go back here, is that, left click.
There you go.
Yeah. You can go to my profile. And so now you go to my profile page, and what you can see is a bunch of stuff about my privacy policy and about what we're doing at Open Consent. Thank you, Andrew. Easier to see. And importantly, what you do is you've got a bunch of stuff which you can then automate, right? So if you then were to continue, here to the question earlier about what kind of questions can I ask? So then based on whether it's we do a lot around facial rec and physical security and other things, but these questions here are then customized to the particular company or service or sector that you're in. You can do something about privacy or surveillance. You can ask questions about security, or you can create a privacy request. And in any of these cases, a receipt is generated. And so these are different kinds of receipts. But in all cases, they're based on the consent receipt standard. And then the other thing that you can do here very quickly is that you'll see that we're keeping the receipts on the controller side in this network. So there's a notice repository. And here, the reason that one of the reasons that green check mark was green was because as a company, we're still the same company. You can go to the state of Massachusetts, you can see we're registered, see we're still registered there. And in fact, our privacy policy, the last time it was checked, hadn't changed, right? Hash privacy policy, no change in policy. The combinations of those two things drive the green check mark. And then, just one other piece of this, when we actually see, besides tracking the privacy policy, you're actually tracking that privacy profile as well. So it's a combination of all these things. Everywhere in this, there's an opportunity to use notice receipts or the Cantara consent receipt specification. So thank you, Dev, for not blowing things up, and thank you for the time this morning.
Thank you, Sal. That's great.
Yeah, Sal at openconsent.com. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And again, showing you that.
Sphere identity.
Sorry, hold on. There we go. So in this case, the consent receipt specification is the record format for a product and a platform that is entirely about personal data and privacy control and rights, as compared to the other ones, which are commercial products about other stuff where the user's actually helped by having a receipt. Okay. Okay, got to move quick here. I get too excited with this stuff, as you can clearly tell. That's not what I want. Just bear with me. That's not what I want either. Okay, let's do this. So just want to show one last user interface for this. So DigiMe is a major participant of the group as well. DigiMe is a personal data management platform. And what they've developed, so it's in their product roadmap and they're developing it now. They're going to release it later this year, something called Consent Mobility, which lets you import consent receipt files, either acting as a shoebox API or just dropping files into their system. So I'm just going to browse for a receipt. And this is just one of the demo receipts that we ran from the previous demo. You know, JSON file contents, if you want to check. And we'll just send it into my DigiMe environment with the inspirational quote. And as it works in the background, so basically DigiMe's, sorry, something didn't happen there. Let me just go back. Okay, it didn't work. Yes, finally something didn't work. It doesn't feel like a demo unless something breaks, right? So what DigiMe has is, it's just a simple dialog box saying, would you like to import this receipt? And you swipe across, and the graphics show the data flowing into your data library, and you can examine it afterwards. It shows up, and you click on it, look at the details, the dashboard kind of idea. And it's very graphically well put together. So it's that experience there. Okay. I'm so relieved. So a little bit more about the shoebox. So wouldn't it be great if every site or app you use just automatically generated receipts so that the users aren't interrupted, right? So that's why we're talking about a shoebox API, as opposed to popping up a dialog box asking the user where they want to save the file, right? It doesn't really matter how implementers choose to implement this, but I'm guessing that unless this happens in the background and these tiny little files and records are created, there's no possible way we're going to get adoption. I mean, it's silly to expect that user interface designers will deliberately put another file save dialog box in front of the users. I mean, that's silly, right? Now, what you saw in the Consentua demo is a browser extension to Chrome that hits Ubisecure's API. So there was an actual transfer between products that you didn't see, right? I was just clicking through and the number was counting up. That was a Chrome extension to the API. Imagine what happens when 1 million people have a data store stuffed full of receipts, which does not exist. Like those data stores do not exist today. Imagine the personalized products to help them manage their data wherever it is on the internet that you guys can invent, right? So many of you are on the side of the table that would generate a receipt, but some people in this audience are on the side of managing the receipts and doing all the cool stuff that there is no software category for it. Okay? So I want to show you this one. So this DataFund.io video I'm not going to talk about it. Yeah. I am going to show you. Watch this part. The UI schema is new. Coming out of the W3C specify these lists of purposes, data processing types, and get some standardization around that. That's the context. Okay. So, repeating myself, as presenters often do, personal data receipt is all these things. Once these things exist in the world and people have repositories, shoeboxes, what are you going to invent and implement? Okay. And download the slides, because the rest of the stuff is about what the work group is up to. We're active. We meet once a week. We're talking about what goes into the next version. We're talking about implementations. We have a list of known implementations. If you have one, please join. Get yourself listed. Here's the contact page if you want to take a snapshot of that. And
Slides are going to be available where?
the slides will be available from the Identiverse site along with the video of this session. Okay? That's all we got. Any questions? I think we got time for one, two maybe. We're here for the rest of the day. We got Jeff here.
We've got another session starting in 8 minutes, so
Talk fast, Jeff. Push up.
Yeah. So storing all the consent is not a stock of traces of where I went and what I consent to. So, like an inference of my browsing activities and things like that. So I saw that there is a signature into those consent receipts. Is there a place for encryption in order to protect the confidentiality?
So that's actually one of the features that we are considering for the updated version, yes. Using non-correlatable identifiers will help, but clearly if you steal someone's shoebox, you know where they've gone. So there are the data protections that go around that.
So there's when you talked about innovation and invention, there's plenty of room in this ecosystem for layers and protection and
Absolutely.
and guidelines for how this enabling technology is going to work.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming out early. Hope it was worth it.